Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Christina Coons, and I'm the Marketing and Event Coordinator here at JMark. This is another one of our Business Builder webinars, and they're designed to help you as business decision makers just answer some of the questions that you have day to day. So today we have 5 choices and Leader, a path to extraordinary success, and this should take about 45 minutes. After that, our next webinar coming up will actually be specific to the accounting industry, and it's called Saving Money, Doing More, an Analysis of IT and Accounting. So if you're interested in that one, just visit our events page at jmark.com/events, and you can get all the information there as far as date and time and how to register and all that good stuff. So today we're very excited to have Pete Manglaviti. He is the Director of Learning here at JMark. And Pete has been involved in IT for 21 years, specializing in Microsoft, Cisco, VMware, and Linux infrastructure. His background includes holding positions ranging from software developer, director of technology, network systems administrator, and chief information officer. Pete believes it's important to recreate the IT challenges in the classroom that employees will face in their day-to-day work environment. In addition to a strong focus on technical maturity, Pete is focused on helping employees mature to upper levels of leadership through the idea of servant leadership. So thank you so much for presenting today, Pete, and I'll hand it to you.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Excuse me. So I have 3 overall goals for this course today, the webinar. The first thing is to talk about the idea of balance wheels. How do you balance your time within the organization? How do you balance personally, professionally? Next, I want to speak a bit about leadership ladder. This deals with the idea of servant leadership and how do you get your folks to level up without having to force them to do something. And finally, I want to talk about developing a language of culture within the organization. I'm sure many of you face those kind of challenges as your numbers grow within your organization. Culture oftentimes becomes more difficult to hold on to. So I want to speak a bit about some ways that you can immediately take this information and put it into effect fairly quickly within your own organizations. Real quick, that's my background. Please, by all means, if you have a question or a comment about the webinar, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email. I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. I don't pretend to know it all, so I'd love feedback and other ideas to bounce off each other. So by all means, look forward to hearing from you. All right, so before we get into the core of the webinar, just a bit of background about my experience with leadership type seminars and books. Like probably many of you, I've been to all the different major seminars for leadership. I've read all the books. And oftentimes you find a couple nuggets here and there, and the remainder of the time you sit there and you go, you know what? I know this already. I'm doing this already. So what my goal is to just give you some nuggets that you can take into your organizations right away to make an impact. I'm not expecting to reinvent the wheel, but if we can find 1 or 2 things that could optimize, I feel like it's a good ROI. So we're first going to dig into 5 choices. And this is a Franklin-Covey product. Can anyone relate to this? Emails in the middle of the night. There was a time when I could. I remember there was a time that I always have my phone on me, right? So if it's 11 o'clock at night or 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, if I get that, beep, that Outlook beep, there I am checking my email. And what I found that although I felt productive, I don't think it was necessarily the best time to do that. Meaning, by doing this and kind of integrating into this culture of always connected, I was tired in the morning, right? I was exhausted. I felt like, hey, I'm answering emails. I've already been working all night long. I'm going back to work again. And I found that wasn't productive. In fact, our company does not want us to do that. The idea at JMark and one of the ideas that we really push culturally is once you're finished with the day, right? Once you get your tasks done, you move the company forward. The minute you walk out the door, we want you to relax, right? Now, there are some special situations such as on-call where someone might need a phone. But in general, what we want folks to do is when they leave our organization, we want them to spend time with friends and family. Now, that might seem obvious, But what I recommend is if you're not specifically saying that to your employees, I feel like you're almost implicitly saying, look, you're always connected. Right? You might say, well, no, that's not our intention. But my suggestion is to make sure folks are getting a good night's sleep, that they are celebrating the wins before they leave work. One thing I do personally, and this is something I'd recommend to any organization, is have your folks ask themselves this one question. Not what did I do today? Not did I stay busy? No, that's fine. But the one question I would challenge you to ask your folks or have them ask themselves is this. What did I do today that moved my career and my team and the company forward? Right? What did I do today specifically that actually helped the company and my career level up, to hit the next level? And if they're not able to say that, if they're having challenges expressing, they might say, well, I've been busy today. I worked real hard. I did what I was told, and that's fine. But I think that next step, and what Five Choices teaches us, is asking to have that employee really look at and say, what am I doing each day to drive the company forward? And if I can't articulate that, I need to speak to somebody. I'm not going to wait for my manager to talk to me. I'm going to proactively talk to my manager and say, look, I need some help to understand how the things I do today are pushing my career or a team of the company forward. That opens up some really fantastic conversations that often do not happen if you wait for the manager to engage the employee that way. Can we relate to this one, sleeping at the desk? You're like, no. What's happening? Why in today's culture, work culture, folks are getting tired around 2 or 3 p.m.? Is it that the work is so difficult? Is it that they're not getting enough sleep? Is it that they are juggling too many tasks? We're going to get brought back to this, but I'd like you to think about that why is it that there's always a certain group of folks that are burnt out by the end of the day, or in certain time crunches, they're burnt out. How about this one? Now I'm in my 40s, so this still drives me insane when I go to a restaurant. You see a group of people and they're not communicating, or they're not talking necessarily with each other. Heck, they might be texting back and forth. I don't know. And why Covey brings this up, why Five Choices brings this up is, as leaders within organizations, we have to understand that, when they leave our walls, when folks go out and, have their personal time, this is becoming the norm. We see challenges with this when folks that are, I don't want to pick on the millennials. I know everyone likes to pick on the millennials. I don't, because we have some really bright folks here. But the culture is different, right? We have to be prepared that when they come into our organization, they might opt for a text message instead of an in-person call or a phone call or in-person meeting. What I see oftentimes in organizations is difficult conversations happen through email. And we all know what happens there, right? It's misconstrued. It's hard to really express the emotion because folks are used to it. If you're seeing that within your organization, what we challenge you to do is to talk about that need for that one-on-one communication, especially when delivering, bad or challenging news. One thing we say around JMark is, hey, so-and-so, I'd like to spend a few minutes to meet. I feel like we have a difficult conversation ahead. I'd like just to get your input, right? Not, you suck, you failed me. I want to meet later today and tell you how bad you are. Just we encourage to say, hey, look, we might need to have a difficult conversation about blah, 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 blah. I look forward to meeting with you at that time. And then during that conversation, really focus in on what went wrong, how it was resolved, and how it's never going to happen again, rather than making people feel bad. Ever feel buried alive Monday mornings? Right? I thought this was a fun little picture. Yeah. And for example, in our business, you can't get around that, right? Oftentimes Monday morning, everything kind of falls on you. What we'll talk about in Five Choices is how do we sort through this gravel coming in? How do we go ahead and accept the fact that this is how our morning might look, and that's fine. In fact, I'm happy that this work comes in. If I wasn't busy, if I didn't have things to do, there'd be no need for me at the company. So I know it's easy for employees to be like, oh, it's Monday, I got so much to do. I'd flip that around and say, thankfully, we have so much to do. We're that good. People want our services, and that allows us to build a career and help support our families. Now, this is for business owners here. This, I would say, of any takeaway, this is the big one, folks. This is the one you really want to start talking with your managers about and kind of sort through it. So the paradox in the survey, Franklin-Covey interviewed 350,000 people, ages, I think it was 18 to 49, I think that was the range. And this, as a business owner, would scare me to death. 60% of those folks reported that the things that they work on, they don't consider relevant for the company. Meaning that of my 8-hour day, what I'm saying is, hey boss, of my 8 hours, 5 hours of my day, not really that relevant. But wow, those three and a half hours, that's fantastic. So think about that for a moment. If your employees came to you with that information, 60% say what they're working on is not relevant in their opinion. So what's going on with that? Well, from the research that we've done at JMark and some of the research I read with Covey, two or three things are happening. Number one is when your folks are looking at what their day looks like, do they understand the why? Do they understand why they're doing it? And then what if they don't do it? What would the impact be higher up on the chain or across the different departments? You see, they might be working on 100% of relevant information from your perspective. But if they don't understand the why, it's real easy for them to say, well, you know what, half my day, I don't know why I fill this form out. I guess it might apply to something, but I don't understand why I'm doing it. And the problem with that is when they don't understand the why, one, you lack that commitment. They might get the work done, but you lack the passion, right? For example, with Christina, who you heard from earlier, if I knew something I worked on was going to mess her up if I don't get it done, I'm going to have a deeper conversation with her. I'm going to look deeper into my work to figure out, how do I set her up for success? How do I make her day easier? Now it's relevant. Now I know I'm helping other people in the organization, which ultimately should help my career as well. So that's the first thing. Do your folks understand why they're doing it? And the second thing is with the 5 choices environment, that idea of servant leadership, where the leaders serve those that do the work, which is very much a JMark philosophy. What we would say is this, is not just understand why you're doing it, but if there's anything on that list that is not driving the company forward in your mind, I'd recommend having your folks speak up. Give them that safety, right? That environment where they can go to their manager and say, look, I know I'm scheduled for this meeting at 2:00 every week, but I don't understand why I'm in it. Could you please help me understand the relevance? And without fear of them being looked at as a troublemaker within the organization or fear that their manager's gonna look down at them. If you really want to take these principles and run with it, they should be looking at their work and challenging everything they're working on. If they can't explain to you why it's relevant, you got to look at it again and figure out, how do you make the adjustment? Because when your folks are the ones looking at the relevancy, when they're looking at, why should I be doing it? It opens up some fantastic conversations. It helps build alignment within the organization. So for example, if a meeting, we've had tons of examples here at JMark over the last couple of years where this has been to effect. We've reduced meetings. I can tell you we had a meeting that used to happen once a week. The folks spent 90 minutes meeting. And because they started really asking questions on the relevance, they trimmed it down to 25 minutes. We have most of our folks look now at their daily schedules and look at it weekly and challenge their supervisors and their teammates going, hey guys, why are we doing this? What exactly is going to be the net benefit of it? So again, this paradox and survey should frighten you. First of all, if that's 350,000 people saying over half their day is not relevant, but I think it's a learning opportunity to figure out, how do you get your folks engaged? How do you have them take responsibility for it in asking the questions? And again, once they tie it into their idea, where they're challenging their workload, it's that ownership. They're going to own it. They're going to do much better with it. So the 5 topics, Franklin-Covey, it's broken up into choices, One is act on the important, don't react to the urgent. React to the urgent. Two, go for the extraordinary, don't settle for ordinary. And those are the two topics I'm going to focus on in this lecture. Believe me, if I had a couple hours, I'd love to go through the entire thing with you folks. Time constraints, you know how that works. Choice 3 is schedule big rocks, don't sort gravel. Choice 4 is ruling your technology, talking about things like, well, here's a tidbit. If you have folks in your organization that talk about how much they hate all the email coming in, right? And believe me, we're in the same position in terms of trying to limit the amount of email that constantly comes in. And we have certainly some ways to get around that. But what I would challenge you to do is ask those folks what kind of Outlook rules do they have set up? What kind of filter rules do they have? Again, I can't speak for every single person, but more often than not, when I hear people really get into how much they hate all the emails coming in, it's because they have a box full of, like one inbox full of just nonsense, right? They're not creating rules to sort it. So for example, when my manager, Kevin, messages me, I get a ding in a special folder, right? When HR needs something from me, I have a ding in a special folder. When our CEO needs me for something, when I get an email, I have a special folder, a special sound for that, because I need to make sure that when those type of emails come in, I'm immediately alerted. Now, there are some things I get emails on where I still don't know why I'm getting it. But okay, if we don't want to get rid of the report, I'll create a folder to store all that stuff for later, and then I can parse it when I need to. But my inbox is clean, right? That's, I think, the first major step to really ruling your technology. If you're using Outlook specifically, what filters do you have in place? If you don't, you might want to talk to your tech folks there and devise a plan. Because everyone I know here at JMark that I feel like really has their act together in organization, they have that. They have rules in place. And then finally, choice 5, which I really wish we had time to cover today, is fueling your fire, don't burn out. Right? How do you keep your folks engaged? And let's speak a bit about this. How do you keep them moving forward? How do you make sure that they're happy with what they're doing and they have the right amount of energy throughout the day? I'm finding that energy management really is becoming a much more important topic, especially when demands become more and more. Cool, so let's get into some of the meat of it. Act on the important, don't react to the urgent, choice 1. Well, here's something that I believe you can take right away. And if you have folks that get stressed out in your organizations and they feel overwhelmed and they feel, or you feel it hurts their productivity, I think this little exercise is going to do quite a bit for you. So when we talk about the brain, we're talking about prefrontal cortex and the emotional brain. The prefrontal cortex, you can see here from the slide, this is all the long-term planning, the self-control, the choices, the things that we really want to spend our day at work, at least I believe, is that's where I want most of my time spent. The emotional brain is more, as you can see here, reflexes, instincts, emotions, reactions, impulses. Go back. So you're like, oh, great. That's fantastic, Pete. What does that mean? How does that benefit me? Well, let me tell you a bit about test takers, and then I'm going to go ahead and translate that into just general business. So I have a really good history in Southwest Missouri helping folks pass certification exams from everything from Cisco, Microsoft, VMware, so on and so forth. And it's not that I'm so good at this as much as I understand why people fail. And what happens is this, and this is kind of a quick little summary, but have you ever had the situation where you shake someone's hand at a conference, for example, and the minute you let go of their handshake, you're like, oh, what was their name again? Yeah, me. In fact, when I go to things, when I can bring my wife, she's the one that keeps track of all this because I'm just quick to forget. It's not that it's not important to me, it's just, I start stressing about remembering the name, and then sure enough, I eventually forget the name if I'm not careful. But here's what happens. And then later on that night, you go home, you're in the shower, you're having dinner, you're in bed, and you wake up and you go, Bob. His name is Bob. Hopefully everyone can relate to that experience. Or have a test taking, whether it's in high school, college, certification, any kind of exams. You knew the material, right? You studied and studied and studied. And then when you go into that test, and whether it's yourself or your folks that you manage, they go in to take that exam, and they're doing fine, and then they they don't know an answer. And then they don't know another answer. And then by the time they get to the third question, it doesn't matter what it's asking, they're done. And the second they leave that exam, they walk outside, you know what happens, right? It all comes back. Why is that? And then how can you guys use that as an advantage within your organization today? Here's what happens. And again, I'm not a medical doctor. I can only tell you from case studies. But what happens is when you exhibit stress, when you start getting stressed out over things, right, the emotional brain is really taken over. Cortisone is released within the body and some other chemicals. And why it's not a bad thing, oftentimes these chemicals are used to repair muscle, for example. They have a really interesting effect on recall. So what happens is as you get stressed out and these chemicals increase, think about a wall being built up to long-term memory. So I'm stressed, I'm at a test, I'm stressed. I can't remember the answer. So now more chemicals are released, my wall is built, I'm having trouble recalling long-term memory. I'm now stressed because I can't access long-term memory. Guess what happens? Yep, stress goes up more. Now it becomes even more difficult. It becomes a loop to eventually you flat out don't have access to material, the information. And then once you get out of the exam, what happens? Your stress decreases, the chemicals dissipate, and now you have access to the memory. Isn't that interesting? I can tell you firsthand, I know that's a fact because my wife has said things in the past like, I'm so mad at you right now, I can't even think straight. And I used to be, I heard her say that, I'd be like, yeah, okay, really? But no, what happened was she was stressed out. It was a repeating cycle. And sure enough, that's why we take a break. You walk away for a few minutes. That's why, when couples argue, you generally walk away. Stress is reduced. You come back, and now you can have a great prefrontal cortex type conversation. So how can you use this in your organization? Well, one thing is this, just on the testing side, is you want to make sure that your folks know that when they go into test, they have to keep as a relaxed posture as possible. Meaning, if they did the work to prepare for the exam, there's nothing more they're going to learn from that moment. So they have to go in there confident, knowing, you know what, this is kind of a waste of my time. I'm going to pass anyway, but okay, if I have to click a couple buttons, so be it. Now, you got to do the studying too, right? You can't just go in confident, but you have to keep cool. They have to learn that, for example, when they don't know something, it's fine. If you can go back to it later, go back to it. If not, move on. Because if you fixate on that problem, you're going to have issues. Now, how about your workplace? Think about any position within your company, right? You have an accounting person, and they're looking at the screen, and they're staring at the numbers for the last 20 minutes, and they're getting more and more stressed out because they can't see it. Do you really think spending another 10 minutes in front of that computer is really going to help them at all? No. In fact, the longer they sit there, that cycle continues. So the best thing for them to do is to get up, get some water, go talk to somebody, get your mind off that problem, get the stress down to where it needs to be, and then come on back later, and sure enough, you'll get a fresh perspective. So what does that take from the business? It's not just telling folks that, it's encouraging a culture to understand that. It's okay to get off your desk. It's okay to shoot darts if you dartboards in your company. It's okay to socialize. Don't be afraid to get up. Because nobody wants to be seen as that person that's not working. I've been in many positions before where I'm outside walking around the buildings because I need that moment to clarify. So here's the language. I want you, and again, I strongly recommend getting the 5 Choices book by Franklin-Covey. But this is a structure, a way to communicate with folks within the organization, and it works absolutely fantastic with supervisors. So if you look at the important and non-important, right, top to bottom, and then you see left to right, urgent and not urgent. So to make sure we're on the same page, if I said this was a Q1 issue, you tell me that it is important and urgent. If I told you it's a Q3 issue, it's not important but urgent. So what does this mean? So Q1 is both important and urgent. These are crises within your company that you can't avoid, right? They are, emergency meetings, something crashes for one of your clients, something has to be filled out today, right? These are things that are just, they have to be done within your organization. As a managed service provider, companies pay us to deal with their Q1 issues. But what I challenge you to do in this framework is to challenge anything that's a Q1 that didn't have to be. Meaning, let's say, for example, you have a policy where if somebody wants to travel, they have to fill out a form for their hotel, their airfare, their car, food, and so forth. And they knew about it 3 weeks prior, but they decided to do it last minute. Do you see how that now puts the company in a Q1 state that they didn't have to be in? If the person would have planned ahead of time, it wouldn't be a Q1. Or let's say, for example, with Christina, I owe her a report, and I had 2 weeks to do it, and I knew I was going to be late on it, but I didn't communicate that with her. And I let her know last minute. Do you see how what could have been an easy thing for her, I've now put her in an artificial Q1 state? So after this meeting, after this webinar, I challenge you to look at yours and your subordinates and ask yourself, what are the Q1s within our business that we can't avoid? And what are the Q1s in our life, whether it's you personally or within your teams, that are happening because we're not managing our time correctly, right? Because here's the deal. Here's the truth. When it comes to Q1, if somebody is in a Q1 state for too long, they will burn out, right? And this, what we'll talk about quadrant 4 in a moment. If somebody comes to work every day and all they feel like is they're not doing all that proactive work we spoke about, right? Long-term goals and vision, but they're only putting out fires. What's going to happen is either they're going to burn out as far as performance goes, or somebody else is going to give them that phone call, another business, and offer them greener pastures, right? Easiest way to recruit somebody from another company is focusing on their Q1s. Ask them about their day, on what their day looks like. And if they are constantly having to put out fires, it's a real easy way to pull people out. So as a company in leadership, we are always looking at not just individual Q1s, but what does the Q1 of the company feel like? And are we mitigating those as much as possible? So for example, sometimes if someone turns in something late to me, I'll use the language, say, look, I'll be happy to get it done, but man, you put me in a Q1 state. If you would have let me know a couple of days earlier, I could have been in Q2 on this. And when your entire company understands that language, right, it becomes less emotional and it's just more to the point. Someone nods and goes, oh, hey, I'm so sorry. No problem. But I'm in Q1 right now, just to let you know. Q3, not important, both urgent. This is the quadrant of distraction. And everyone here is listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. Unnecessary reports, unnecessary meetings, other people's Q1s that don't relate to you. My challenge to you is this. Anything you identify inside Q3, so you say there's a meeting, like I gave an example earlier, there's a meeting that you don't think you belong in. The rule is nothing stays in Q3. You have to challenge it. I mean, you have to either dump it into what's called Q4, which is waste, or you have to find a way to move it into Q2, which is productivity. But it just can't sit there. You can't just sit there and go, it is what it is. It is not. Speak to somebody. Needless interruptions and reports. I mentioned if there's a report that I get, I don't think I should, I ask to be taken off it. And if someone says I need it, great, I create a rule and put it in another folder and look at it at my time. So again, anything in Q3 that you list, find a way to either dump it or reclassify it in Q2. Q4 is waste. That's both not urgent and not important. It mentions things like trivial work, excessive activities, watching 10 cat videos instead of 3. I'm a cat guy, so 3 might cut it, 10 maybe not so much. But what I would guess in your organizations, it's not really Q4 in terms of people who are lazy. What I would challenge you to do is this. If you find folks that are not performing like they did, that you find that they are in this excessive relaxation mode and not quite pushing things forward, what does your Q1 look like? Because if they're a good employee, if you made a good choice on the employee, I don't think it's the laziness. I bet you what's happening is, at least in their mind, their day is full of fires. And what happens is subconsciously, if your day is full of fire, you're going to find ways to try to mitigate that. And you're going to find yourself in Q4. Oh goodness, I found myself doing that last week. I have I have a couple of things to do before the end of the month to close out the year. And I'm sitting there, and I was watching a couple videos, and I'm like, why am I feeling so lethargic? Why am I feeling, this is true, why am I feeling this way? And then I looked at my Q1s and said, you know what? I don't really have to be doing those right now. I'm just forcing myself to do it. And now I'm forcing myself to have to waste time. Again, In a servant leadership environment, our goal is to have the employee train them the correct way, but have the employee notice this before the manager ever does. Meaning, I noticed that I was slacking off in some areas before my manager even knew it. That allows me to correct it beforehand. And then finally, oh goodness, I wish I had more time. Last one is Q2. This is important but not urgent because we spent the time to be able to do things like creative thinking and planning and prevention, dreaming about what does our company, in a servant leadership model, the idea is it is our company, I have a say in it. What are the things I want to be working on to help drive the company forward? See, that's where the excitement comes in. Anytime you can minimize Q1s and get folks working in Q2, you see a very different approach to the work. As I joke around, I haven't worked in like 20 years. They pay me to do what I love doing because I get to spend a lot of my time in the Q2 area like this seminar. I'm gonna go a little bit faster here. So I mentioned that these quadrants are a great way to talk within your teams. And I love it for managers because I can say to our CEO, go, look, I know you feel this is Q2, but to me, it feels like Q3 because of these reasons. Can you help me understand the value? Right? Or, you know what, to my boss, Kevin, hey, Kevin, I'm in Q1. All these tasks are Q1. Can we maybe take these two off of it so I can focus on one Q2 item for this quarter and then backtrack on these maybe in a couple of weeks? Those are the kind of conversations when you start following this 5 choices methodology that happen within the organization. It's a common language. It's a real easy way, especially for your folks that may be a little bit more shy, to communicate within their teams and their managers because it's the framework built. Everybody knows in this company what a Q4 looks like. Everybody knows when I tell them you put me in Q1, they know what that means. Clarifying questions. This is a biggie. And it might seem obvious, but as I'm in charge of also new hire training, and I find that is not as obvious as I thought it would be. Meaning that when something is asked of us, let's say, for example, my manager has a couple projects he'd like me to work on. I'll certainly get them done, but I'm going to ask a lot of clarifying questions to make sure that I'm on the same page. So I'll ask things like, so when does it really need to be done? You're like, what? Manager assigned it. Yeah, it's fine. But when does it really need to be done? And then what happens if I don't get it done in time? Is this is this something that's going to hurt us internally? Is this something with a client? Is this something with regulation? Is this something that you would like done right now, but really it doesn't have to be done the next month? The reason I'm asking that is to balance my time correctly. Is to look at my tasks, my work for the day and for the week, and say, are all those items as efficient as possible? Which of my priorities is most important to do now? I love that one. When I'm asked to do multiple things at once from different people, leadership in the organization, I'll ask that. I'll go to my boss and say, of these items, which one do you believe is most important now? And then what's the impact? If your folks are not asking those kind of questions and just doing it, just doing the work, you might face that challenge we spoke about earlier where they feel like 60% of their work is not relevant because they don't know why they're doing it. They're just doing it because boss said to do it. Yep, boss said to do it. And I'm not saying to tell your folks to challenge everything that's asked of them. But again, from a servant leadership standpoint, from a JBark standpoint, if you don't know why you're working on it, it's your responsibility to speak up. It's not a we hope you do it. We make it a requirement within our company. Oh goodness, I got about 10 minutes. I'm gonna have to get through this a little bit quicker. I hope you guys find some value in this webinar, some things you can take back to your organization immediately. I highly recommend picking up the 5 Choices by Franklin-Covey book. It'll run you about $10 in Amazon. It'll be the best 10 bucks you've spent in your life in terms of work, my personal opinion. So I'm gonna go through this really quick, but this is something I'd really like you to explore is when we describe ourselves, when we talk about who we are, we typically describe ourselves in terms of roles, don't we? So, hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm Bob. I'm an artist. I coach Little League. I'm a husband. I have kids. It's pretty typical is we describe ourselves in roles. I love this thing, by the way. It's one of my favorite things to do. Is what I challenge you to do is to create a wheel. Okay? It will look just like this, like Cariata pizza. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to place the different roles that are important to your life within this wheel. So this could be business roles. It could be personal roles. It could be a mix. So in this case here, this person did manager, colleague, team member, community leader, friend, career, the roles that matter most to them. And then what we ask you to do is to rank where you believe you are. So the closer to the center is the lower rating. So a 0 means I'm not doing anything in this area, and a 10 is saying you're rocking it. So for each of these roles, what we ask you to do is to put a point. So for example, in partner, you see the dots a little bit above a 5, so that's a 6. Mother, father's a 5, manager's an 8. And then what we ask you to do is to connect the dots. And what this does, and this is really fun to do in families, I'll talk about that in just a second, but we want you to connect the dots and then just take a look specifically at how your life is balanced and ask yourself, is that how it's supposed to be? In other words, are you content with those numbers the way they are? And if not, what you want to do is you want to identify the areas that you want to work on by creating goals around it. So looking at this person's balance wheel, it looks like they've been spending a lot of time on their health, but they've neglected a lot of time in sports, which makes sense. And they're really trying to kick butt as a manager. But man, look what's happening as a mother and father. Look what's happening with their relationships with their friends. So you can see where they're spending their time. And like for me, I might say, you know what? I want to spend some more time with my friends. So maybe I need to allocate 1 or 2 hours less on my manager responsibilities, maybe stuff I take at home, and focus on going out with my friends maybe once or twice a week. And maybe I can cut down the sports a little bit because I really want to spend more time in my community leadership role. So that's what we do is we identify the different roles, we rate where we're at, and then we create action plans. I'm sorry, I have to go a little bit fast here, but we create SMART goals around that. So for example, SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. So let's say on my balance wheel, I had health at a 4. So in order to make a change, I might create a SMART goal that I will work out 3 times a week or 2 times a week for 45 minutes, 25 minutes of cardio, 20 minutes of lifting weights. And they'll reevaluate where I believe I'm at in 3 more months. So I create a specific goal. I can measure it because if I'm not attending 2 times a week, I'm failing. It's achievable. That's within my realm of time. It's relevant because if I don't do this, my health's going to deteriorate even further. And there's a time bound. There's a time sensitivity to it. Because again, you don't just move one item up and everything else goes with it. It's sacrifices, meaning that if I spend the time on my health, well, here's a good example for me. I made a big deal about my health this last year. My doctor made it clear to me. My doctor said basically, in not too less of words, if you don't make a change, you will die. It's about maybe a year and a half ago. I was way overweight. I wasn't working out. I was eating Snicker bars for dinner. Well, health became more important. So I started working out more. I started eating better. But that also took an impact on my financial. So although my health was going up by eating healthy and making the right decisions in the grocery store, I'll tell you what, a Snicker bar and, peaches, very different costs, right, involved. So I had to be willing to say I'm going to move my health forward by also accepting the fact that I have to lower my financial, that it's going to take an impact on that. Why do most goals fail? Okay, wrap it up with this piece right here. I'm sorry I couldn't get through everything. It's because it's like, okay, so I'm assigned a goal at work. Great. And, that's great. Might move the company forward, allows me to keep my position, provide my family, and so forth. But there's not a lot of energy behind it. What most folks are missing when creating goals, and I would strongly recommend you look into this, is role statements. Remember that Q2, that productivity, those long-term plans? You have to create a role statement that allows you to align the specific tasks to get the job done. So check this one out. For example, I'm helping my wife, Allison, with her side business. She's a counselor and she doesn't want to work for somebody the rest of her life. So I'm not just, as Allison's husband. No, I'm going to make it more personal. As Allison's best friend. Now, with that, that's a bit more emotional. As her best friend, I feel like I have a different level of accountability than just being her husband. As her best friend, I will show my unconditional love and support. How are you going to do it? Through regular communicating my feelings and helping her achieve her life goals. Helping her achieve her life goals. Does it make sense that with that role statement, creating my action plan, right? Creating my SMART goals is fairly easy, right? Because I know specifically not only what I'm doing, but why I'm doing it, right? Why am I trying to make this the best possible? Because I'm trying to help her achieve her life goals. Oh, and I'm going to make my last thing to mention is another book, another $10 I strongly recommend is Turn the Ship Around by David Marquette. David talks a bit about the Navy and how he went from kind of an authoritarian type leader to taking the servant leadership approach. How do you push down decisions at a lower level so folks at those levels can not only get it done, but you're training them to become leaders themselves? Right? How do we make it in such a way that we take a look at what level that person's at, and rather than just always giving them the answer, we're building the leadership, servant leadership mentality to help them work their way up the ladder. So not only decisions are be able to handle at lower levels, people have more power over the outcomes, and then your leaders can focus on other things than micromanaging, right? It's not about micromanaging. What I want our leaders to do, as my boss, I want our CEO and my boss to look at new opportunities for us. I want them to look at new buildings, new profit sharing programs. I want them to be focused on that, not the areas that I could be handling myself, right? I'm trying to protect their time. And that's a whole deep dive into servant leadership. All right. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. You have my email address. By all means, if you have any questions, thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. I really enjoyed our time this morning. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pete, for presenting today. I love hearing you talk about that stuff, and it was a really good refresher for me as well. Thank you, audience, for listening in today. As a reminder, our next webinar is specific to the accounting industry, and it's called Saving Money, Doing More, an Analysis of IT and Accounting. So you can get more information on that one on our events page, jmark.com/events. And if you'd like any more information on today's content, like Pete said, you can reach out to him. We also will have a recording available, so if you'd like that, just let us know and we'll be happy to send it to you. And again, thank you everyone so much, and have a great rest of your week.
All right, see you folks. Bye-bye.